The quiet hum of the city buzzed below as she perched on the rooftop, her gaze locked on the man in the apartment across the street. Her mission was clear: observe, infiltrate, and extract his secrets. For weeks she had studied him, memorized his habits, cataloged his life down to the smallest details. He was just another assignment, a stepping stone in her career, as one of the galaxy's top infiltrators. Or so she thought. He wasn't like the others she had been sent to monitor. Most targets were predictable, dull even. But this one, he intrigued her. The way he carried himself, the way he laughed even when alone, the way he moved through his day with an air of quiet determination, it all fascinated her in a way she couldn't explain. She told herself it was just part of the job, that understanding him was necessary for her success. But deep down she knew there was something more. Something that made her linger just a little longer than she should. Her holographic disguise flickered briefly as she adjusted the cloaking device hidden beneath her coat. She hated these human forms, hated the way it made her feel disconnected from her true self. But it was necessary. To him she would appear human, ordinary, even someone who could blend into the crowd. She had spent hours perfecting every detail of her appearance, calculating the exact combination of features that would make her approachable, yet unremarkable. Tonight was the night she would make contact. Her orders were explicit: gain his trust, learn his secrets, and report back to her superiors. There was no room for failure, no room for hesitation, but as she descended the fire escape, her heart raced in a way that had nothing to do with the mission. For the first time in her career, she felt something she couldn't name, a pull that made her question everything she had been trained to ignore. The bar was dimly lit, the soft murmur of voices blending with the occasional clink of glasses. She sat at the counter, her carefully crafted appearance blending seamlessly with the crowd. He was there at the far end, nursing a drink and staring absently at the television mounted on the wall. She watched him out of the corner of her eye, pretending to be engrossed in the contents of her phone. When their eyes met, it was like a spark ignited something she hadn't prepared for, something that sent a jolt through her system. He offered a polite smile, the kind you give a stranger in passing, and she felt her heart skip a beat. This wasn't part of the plan. She was supposed to control the situation, not let herself be drawn in by him. But there was something about his gaze, something that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't expected. "Mind if I sit here?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. He gestured to the empty seat beside him, his expression friendly but cautious. "Sure," he replied. She slid onto the stool, her movements calculated but natural. They exchanged pleasantries, nothing out of the ordinary, but every word felt charged with an unspoken tension. As the night wore on, she found herself slipping, forgetting the mission, forgetting who she was supposed to be. They laughed, they shared stories, and for a moment she felt human. It was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. She knew she was breaking every rule, every protocol drilled into her, but she couldn't stop herself. There was something about him, something that made her want to abandon her mission and just be. But reality came crashing down when his expression shifted, his eyes narrowing slightly as he leaned closer. "You're not from around here, are you?" he asked, his voice low. Her heart froze, her mind racing as she tried to calculate her next move. "What makes you say that?" she replied, keeping her tone light. He studied her for a moment, his gaze piercing as though he could see through the layers of her disguise. "Just a feeling," he said, finally leaning back with a small smile. She exhaled silently, the moment passing but the tension lingering. She realized then that this wasn't just a mission anymore. It was something far more dangerous and far more personal. Days turned into weeks and their connection grew deeper. She told herself it was just part of the mission, that gaining his trust was necessary to complete her objective. But with every shared laugh, every stolen glance, every moment spent together, she felt herself slipping further from the person she was trained to be. He was unlike anyone she had ever known, intelligent, kind, fiercely loyal. He challenged her in ways she hadn't anticipated, making her question everything she thought she knew about humans, about herself, about her mission. She found herself longing for his company, for the sound of his voice, for the way he made her feel like she was more than just a spy playing a role. But the closer they grew, the more she struggled with the weight of her deception. Every word, every gesture, every touch was a lie built on a foundation of manipulation and deceit. She wanted to tell him the truth, to reveal who she really was, but she knew the consequences would be catastrophic. Her people didn't tolerate failure, and betrayal wasn't an option. If they discovered her feelings for him, they wouldn't just terminate the mission. They would terminate her. One evening, as they sat together on the rooftop of his apartment, Gazing out at the city lights, she felt the weight of her secrets pressing down on her. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He turned to her, his expression open and trusting, and she felt her heart ache with the knowledge of what she was about to do. "I'm not who you think I am," she began, her words faltering as she searched for the right way to explain. But before she could continue, he reached out, taking her hand in his. "I know," he said simply, his voice steady. She stared at him, her mind racing as she tried to process his words. "You do?" she asked, her voice trembling. He nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I've known for a while. You're not like anyone I've ever met, but that doesn't change how I feel about you." His words hit her like a tidal wave, the truth of his acceptance breaking through the wall she had built around herself. She felt tears welling in her eyes, a mixture of relief and disbelief as she realized that he saw her for who she truly was, and he didn't care. In that moment, she made her choice. The mission didn't matter. Her people didn't matter. All that mattered was him and the connection they shared. For the first time in her life, she felt free, not as a spy or an infiltrator, but as herself. As they sat together beneath the stars, she knew that their journey was far from over. But whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, united by a love that defied the boundaries of their worlds. Word of her betrayal didn't take long to reach her superiors. Back on her homeworld, operatives monitored her every move. Watching the anomaly unfold as she abandoned the mission, she knew the repercussions were inevitable. No one defected from their kind without consequences. But she wasn't the same person who had taken on this mission. Something inside her had changed, and there was no turning back. Sitting in his apartment, she explained the gravity of the situation to him. He listened intently, his brow furrowed in concentration. "They'll come for me," she admitted, her voice steady despite the weight of her confession. "Not just me, for you too. They'll see us as a threat now." He stood up, pacing across the room, the gravity of her words sinking in. "So, what do we do?" he asked, his tone determined. She glanced at him, a small smile touching her lips. "We fight back," she replied. The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparation. She trained him in ways he couldn't have imagined, teaching him alien strategies, combat techniques, and how to use the technology she had smuggled. In return, he showed her human resilience, his quick thinking in moments of tension becoming a crucial part of their strategy. When the attack came, it wasn't subtle. The first wave of operatives descended under the cover of night, their sleek, silent ships hovering ominously above the city. But she was ready. Together, they launched a counterattack that was as bold as it was unexpected, using the very tools her people had designed against them. As the battle unfolded, she realized just how far she had come. The woman who had once seen him as a target now stood beside him, fighting for a life they could share. And when the dust settled, their bond felt unshakable, forged in the heat of battle and the fire of defiance. The aftermath of their victory was short-lived. Though they had repelled the first wave of attackers, they both knew her people wouldn't stop. For the first time, she suggested something she had never considered before, seeking an alliance with humanity. "They won't stop until they've erased this," she said, her voice firm as they stood on the rooftop, gazing at the horizon. "But your people, they might be the key to ending this." He looked at her, skepticism flashing in his eyes. "You think Earth is ready for that? For them?" he asked, gesturing to the distant stars. She smiled faintly, her gaze softening. "Earth is more capable than you realize. I've seen it in you, in the way you think, the way you fight. Your people are resilient. That's what they fear." It wasn't easy convincing Earth's leaders to meet with an alien defector, let alone trust her. But when she stood before them, explaining the full scope of the threat, the tide began to shift. She spoke with conviction, her voice steady as she laid bare the truth of her world's intentions and the danger Earth faced. By the end of the meeting, a fragile alliance had formed. It wasn't perfect, and there were those on both sides who doubted it would last. But for the first time, she felt hope, a hope that was bolstered by the man at her side, his unwavering support giving her the strength to keep fighting. Together, they began to build something new, a bridge between two worlds that had once been on a collision course. And in the process, they discovered not only the strength of their bond, but the potential of what they could achieve together. Months later, standing on the observation deck of a human spacecraft, she watched as Earth slowly receded into the distance. The stars stretched out before them, a vast expanse of possibilities. Beside her, he stood silent but resolute, his hand resting lightly on hers. Their journey wasn't over, not by a long shot. They had traded the relative safety of Earth for the unknown, setting out to dismantle the threat her people posed from within. It was a dangerous mission, one that carried no guarantees of success. But as she looked at him, his gaze steady and filled with determination, she felt a sense of peace. "I never thought I'd end up here," she admitted, her voice quiet but filled with emotion. He smiled, squeezing her hand. "Neither did I, but I'm glad we are." As they prepared to embark on their next mission, she felt a sense of purpose she had never known before. She wasn't just a spy or a warrior anymore. She was something more, something stronger because of him, and because of the love they had found in the most unlikely of circumstances. Together, they were unstoppable, a force that would defy the odds and shape the future of two worlds. And as the stars beckoned them forward, she knew that their story was only just beginning. Their journey took them to the heart of her people's territory, a place she had never thought she would return to as a traitor, an outsider, and a target. The space station loomed ahead, a massive structure of twisting metal and alien architecture, suspended in the darkness of space. It had once been her home, a place she had known every inch of. Now it was her enemy's stronghold, and within it lay the leaders she once trusted. They docked in a hidden part of the station's lower levels, where she knew security would be lax. As they moved through the cold, metallic corridors, she felt the weight of her past pressing down on her. Every sound echoed. Every shadow seemed to hold a memory, a piece of her life before she met him. He placed a hand on her shoulder, sensing her unease. "Are you ready for this?" he asked softly, his gaze steady and reassuring. She nodded, taking a deep breath, steeling herself. She knew the risks, and she knew there was no turning back now. Her people wouldn't hesitate to eliminate both of them if they were caught. But with him by her side, she felt a surge of courage she hadn't felt in years. Navigating the station required every skill she had ever learned. They slipped past guards, avoided security cameras, and hacked into control panels to disable locks and alarms. His presence gave her strength, his calm confidence balancing her tension. Together, they moved like shadows, a perfect team in sync. Finally, they reached the control room, where the command center held the information they needed. This room was the beating heart of her people's plans, and if they could access it, they could dismantle the threat from within. She took a deep breath and began hacking into the system, his watchful gaze never leaving her. They downloaded the data, watching the screen fill with information, maps, and secret plans. She felt a thrill of victory, but she knew their mission wasn't over yet. The hardest part was yet to come, getting out alive. Just as they prepared to leave, the door slid open, and a group of operatives entered, led by a figure she recognized immediately, her former mentor. His eyes narrowed as he took in the scene, his gaze flicking from her to the man standing beside her. She felt a pang of guilt and a surge of anger all at once. This was the person who had trained her, who had once been like family, and now he was her enemy. "You've gone too far," her mentor said, his voice cold and accusing. "Do you really think you can betray your own people and get away with it?" She straightened, her expression hardening. "My people are the ones who betrayed me," she replied, her voice steady. "I was loyal. I followed every order. But this, what they plan to do to Earth, to him, it's wrong." Her mentor shook his head, his expression one of disappointment and disdain. "You've let emotions cloud your judgment. This human has weakened you, made you forget who you are." He turned his gaze to the man beside her, eyes narrowing with contempt. "And you're nothing but a pawn in her foolish rebellion." Before her mentor could react, she drew her weapon, her movement swift and precise. Her mentor's eyes widened in shock, and for a brief moment, she saw a flicker of something in his gaze, regret. Perhaps, but she didn't hesitate. She fired, and he fell to the floor, his figure crumpling in silence. She felt a wave of sadness wash over her. But there was no time to grieve. They had to move, and fast. The station was now on high alert. and they could hear the sounds of footsteps approaching. She turned to him, her expression resolute. "We have to go." They ran through the corridors, fighting off guards, dodging blasts, and narrowly escaping traps. The station was in chaos, alarms blaring, lights flashing, and the weight of her actions pressing down on her. But through it all, he was there, fighting by her side, his presence grounding her, reminding her of why she was doing this. After what felt like an eternity, they reached their ship, barely making it out of the station before the defense systems activated. As they sped away from the station, she watched it recede into the darkness, feeling a mixture of relief and sorrow. She had left behind everything she had ever known, severed ties with her past, and betrayed the people who had once been her family. But for the first time, she felt free. They returned to Earth, the data they had collected safely in their hands. The Alliance leaders welcomed them, commending their bravery and commitment to the mission. They were heroes, hailed as the ones who had saved Earth from a threat it didn't even know existed. But for her, the victory was bittersweet. She had lost her home, her people, and a part of herself she would never get back. Yet as she looked at him, standing beside her, his gaze warm and steady, she knew that she had gained something far more valuable. Together, they walked away from the chaos, away from the mission, and into a future that was theirs to build. Their bond was unbreakable, forged in fire and strengthened by love. They had faced the impossible and emerged stronger for it. In the quiet moments that followed, as they sat together under the stars, she felt a sense of peace she had never known. The life they had ahead of them was uncertain, filled with challenges and unknowns, but she knew one thing for certain: they would face it together, side by side, bound by a love that no force in the galaxy could ever break.